Let's practice some MCQs to revise the Merchant of Venice. Look at the first question. How much money did Jessica spend in one night? 80 ducats, 800 ducats, 8,000 ducats, or 8 ducats? So the answer is 80 ducats. Who is the titular Merchant of Venice? Bassanio, Shylock, Antonio, Lorenzo. So that is Antonio because the play is named after him. How did Antonio feel about Shylock's insistence on seeing the terms of the bond fulfilled? So, how does he feel, when he sees that the terms of the bond fulfilled? So, what is Shylock's insistence on it? Is he sorrowful, resigned, angry, or offended? So, actually, he is resigned. Shylock accused Salanio and Salarino of tipping off Bassanio to sail in haste, distracting him on his way from dinner with Bassanio, stealing his money, or having knowledge of Jessica's flight. That is, having knowledge of Jessica's flight. What did Salarino say about Jessica's escape? Jessica and Lorenzo were in Geneva. Jessica and Lorenzo were at Portia's house. Jessica had stolen Shylock's turquoise ring. Or Salarino knew the tailor who stitched Jessica's clothes in which she disguised and eloped. So that is D is the right option. Next, who brings Shylock news from Geneva about Jessica? Lancelot, Abraham, Tubal, or Salarino? That is Tubal. Then, what did Shylock say would happen to Jessica as a result of a betrayal? She would be disowned, she would be sent to hell, she would be stripped of title and her inheritance, she would be dishonored by the synagogue. So, actually, she would be sent to hell. This is what Shylock believes that it would happen. Why did Shylock talk about revenge? Salerno has asked him of goodwill and Donio's flesh be to him. Shylock saw things in his miseries and said this to himself, only to threaten Salarino, or Jessica had fled with Lorenzo. So, the first, when Salarino asked him, of what good will Antonio's flesh be to him? Red wine and Rhenish wine are both wines. What did Salarino imply by comparing Shylock and Jessica to them? Shylock and Jessica were radically different. Shylock and Jessica believed in different religions. They had opposite personalities and they were of different genders. So they had opposite personalities. This is what he wanted to say. What example did Shylock give to justify his revenge? If a Jew wrongs a Christian, his immediate reaction would be revenge, and thus Shylock justifies his actions by this example. Jews are human too, and just like Christians, they would die if poisoned. Jews too laugh when they are tickled. He is unreasonable and thus wants to take revenge. So, the first is the right answer. He gives the example that if a Jew wrongs a Christian, his immediate reaction would be revenge. And thus, Shylock justifies his action by this example. What surprise news does Gratiano give Bassanio? That Antonio is dead, that Antonio's ships have all been destroyed, that he has fallen in love with Nerissa, and that Shylock is on the hunt for Antonio. So, that he has fallen in love with Nerissa. What piece of bad news interrupts the celebration at Belmont? The outbreak of war, Antonio's bankruptcy, Shylock's arrival, Gratiano and Nerissa's engagement. So, that is Antonio's bankruptcy. What did Portia offer to satisfy Antonio's debt to Shylock? 20 times the debt, a casket full of jewels, 2 times the debt, a title of nobility, and some land. So that is 20 times the debt. Who is a symbol of mercy and forgiveness? Antonio, Portia, Bassanio, or the lawyer? So here Portia is the symbol of mercy. No, sorry. Antonio is the symbol of mercy and forgiveness because he showed mercy to Shylock. He did not take the money, he gave it to Lorenzo and Jessica, and then in a way he had forgiven Shylock too. Who among the following was not a suitor of Portia? The Prince of Morocco, the Prince of Aragon, Bassanio, the Duke of Venice? Of course, the Duke of Venice. On what occasion did Bassanio visit Belmont? Bassanio went to Belmont for trading purpose. He went there for the casket test in order to marry Portia. Bassanio went to Belmont to meet Portia or to lend money to Portia. So this B is the answer. He went there for the casket test to marry. What would the removal of Portia's ring mean, according to Portia? Portia was about to set sail for another place. Bassanio was no longer in love with Portia. Bassanio was not ready to marry Portia, or Bassanio had found another partner. So B, like Bassanio was no longer in love with Portia. Portia was overjoyed and gave a ring to Bassanio as a promise of love. What does this mean? It means uh, Portia and Bassanio are very happy to be united and they love each other. Portia wants to trick Bassanio by exchanging a ring as a promise of love. Portia doesn't love Bassanio and is unhappy to marry him. Portia wanted to marry Prince of Aragon, but Bassanio had chosen the right casket. So it means that Portia and Bassanio are happy to be united and they love each other. Which casket did Bassanio choose? Lead, silver, bronze, golden? So, leaden casket. What does Bassanio find inside the casket he chooses? A fool's head, Portia's ring, rubber and dust, Portia's image. So, that is Portia's image because that was the right casket. Where were Antonio and Shylock? Why were Antonio and Shylock enemies? Antonio never paid the money which he took from Shylock. Antonio did not want to be friends with Shylock. Antonio mocked and insulted Shylock at Rialto. Antonio hated Shylock because he mistreated Lancelot. So, third is the answer. Antonio mocked and insulted Shylock. How much money did Shylock lend to Antonio? That is 3,000 ducats. So, B is the option. Portia and Lorenzo discuss helping Antonio. What makes Portia agree to help? For the challenge, Antonio is Bassanio's best friend. She hates Shylock, or Antonio is kind. So, Portia agrees to help him because Antonio is Bassanio's friend. Why did Antonio believe that the Duke cannot change the course of law to save him? Because Shylock was Duke's friend, because Shylock had bribed the Duke, because the state of Venice had suffered losses due to Antonio, because denying Shylock's bond would harm the trade with foreigners like Shylock, on which Venice depended. So, D is the correct answer. Why did Shylock hate Antonio? Not dealing fairly with Shylock in the past, for helping people who hate Jews, for rescuing many people who were indebted to Shylock, helping Jessica run away with Lorenzo. So, third is the correct answer, for rescuing many people who were indebted to Shylock. So, he rescued them by lending money without interest. Who was the bloody creditor mentioned by Antonio? Lorenzo, Shylock, Salarino, or Duke? So, that is none other than Shylock only. Which of the following was not a condition in the bond signed between Antonio and Shylock? Shylock would lend 3,000 ducats to Bassanio. Antonio would be the guarantor of the bond. Shylock would lend money only for 3 months. Shylock would lend money at the rate of interest. So D is the correct answer. That was not a condition. He did not ask for any rate of interest. It was a pound of flesh that he asked for. According to Shylock, what will happen if the Duke does not uphold Shylock and Antonio's contract? The Duke will be arrested. Business in Venice will suffer. Contracts will be broken. Money will be lost. So, what will happen if the Duke does not uphold Shylock and Antonio's contract? So, in that way, business in Venice will suffer. When Shylock disagreed with showing mercy to Antonio, what did Portia say to Shylock? Shylock can put off a pound of flesh without spilling a drop of blood. Shylock can put off a pound of flesh without leaving any mark of cut, without killing him using a sharp weapon, or without using a knife. So, first is the correct answer, without spilling a drop of blood. Why did Antonio say that he would hardly spare a pound of flesh? because he would bribe the Duke to save him, because Bassanio would return the money, because Shylock would forgive him, because Antonio had already lost a lot of weight due to his financial losses. So D is the correct answer. What does Portia send to Padua to secure clothing and documents for herself and Nerissa? Who does she send? Portia's cousin, Dr. Bellario, Portia's servant, Nerissa, Portia's servant, Balthazar, or Lorenzo? So C is the correct answer. She sends Balthazar. After winning the right to marry Portia, why did Bassanio leave her? To get his things, to prepare for the wedding, to prove his love for her, to help Antonio. So D is the correct answer, to help Antonio. Why was the friendship between Antonio and Bassanio godlike? Because Antonio could not sacrifice his life for Bassanio, because Antonio wanted to meet Bassanio before he dies, because Antonio could sacrifice his own life for the sake of Bassanio, because Antonio had lent money to Bassanio and had never asked for it. So, C, because Antonio could sacrifice his own life for the sake of Bassanio. Whom did Portia leave in charge of her house when she left? Nerissa, her servants, Lorenzo and Jessica, a suitor who arrived too late. So, Lorenzo and Jessica. C is the correct answer. Where does Portia tell everyone that she is going? To Padua, to a monastery, to her room, to Venice. So, she said that she has been going to a monastery. Where is Portia really going? To Venice to fight Antonio's case? She sends a servant to a monastery or to Nerissa's house. So A, to Venice to fight Antonio's case. What is Portia's response to Nerissa when she asks of Bassanio and Bresciano? Shall they see us? She says, no, we will stay hidden. Yes, but we'll be dressed like men. Yes, but we will provide them with inspiration. No, but they will hear our voices. So B is the right answer. We will be dressed like men. Who said the line, I wish your ladyship all hearts content? Jessica, Portia, Lorenzo, or Balthazar? So Lorenzo is the right answer. Who is Dr. Bellario? Shylock's friend, Portia's cousin, and renowned legal luminary, a surgeon, renowned historian. So B is the correct answer. He was Portia's cousin and a very renowned lawyer. Where is Balthazar supposed to go? Venice, Rome, Padua, Greece. Padua is the correct answer. According to Lancelot, why do children suffer? Children suffer due to notorious behavior. Children suffer due to the sins committed by their parents, as they do not obey their parents, as they are foolish to make decisions against their parents' wishes. So B is the correct answer. They suffer due to sins committed by their parents. Jessica is Shylock's daughter, Shylock's servant, Lancelot's wife, Portia's servant. So she is Shylock's daughter. A. Whom did Jessica marry? She marries Lorenzo, who was Lancelot, Nerissa's servant, Antonio's servant, Bassanio's servant, or Portia's servant. So he is Bassanio's servant. Where were Lancelot and Jessica? On the street in Venice, inside Portia's room in Belmont, in a garden in Shylock's house, in a garden attached to Portia's house at Belmont. So D is the correct answer. Where does this scene take place? In front of Shylock's house, a garden in Belmont, Exchange Market of Venice, in the court of Venice. So a garden in Belmont. Why did Lancelot tell Jessica that he was worried about her? Her new husband would mistreat her. She might go to hell for the sins of her father. She was manipulated into her marriage. Her father would try to arrest her new husband. So B, because she might go to hell for the sins of her father. On whom did Lancelot blame the rise of bacon? Bacon coming into a trend, Jews not eating pork, Jews being converted, shipments of pork getting shipwrecked. So C, Jews being converted. What did Lorenzo praise Portia for after Bassanio left Belmont? So, her love, her beauty, her strength of character, her patience. So, Lorenzo praises Portia for her strength of character, for her patience, sorry, for her patience. What did Jessica say about Portia when Lorenzo asked her what she thought of Portia? She was beautiful, she was a blessing, she was proud, she was intelligent. So, Jessica says that she was a blessing. Now, these are the MCQs from Act 4. First is, what is the Duke's opinion of Antonio's predicament? A, he doesn't seem to care one way or the other. B, he is angry with Antonio. C, he hopes Antonio has to pay the forfeiture of the bond. And D, he feels sorry for him. So the answer is D, he feels sorry for him. What does the Duke say about Sherlock's plan when he enters the courtroom? To exact the forfeiture of the bond, not to arrive at court, to accept payment late from Antonio, in the end, to show great mercy towards Antonio. So D is the correct option. In the end, to show great mercy towards Antonio. Third, what does Antonio ask the court for? Mercy, to be released, judgment, more time. So Antonio asks for judgment. Next, what does Bassanio offer Shylock? He will no longer abuse Shylock at the Rialto if he forgoes the debt to pay the sum back, 6,000 ducats and Portia. So 6,000 ducats, double the amount is the answer. How does Shylock respond to Bassanio's offer? I don't care if you continue to spit on me. I won't take 36,000 ducats if you offered it to me. Okay, I accept it. Or I won't take Portia because she's a Christian. So B, he says, even if you pay me 6 times, that is 36,000 ducats. Okay, I would not take it. Who does the Duke call into the courtroom? Bassanio, Bellario, a learned doctor, Balthazar, a learned doctor, or Antonio? So, Balthazar. Portia tells Sherlock that his bond is good, but he must show mercy towards Antonio. He has no place in a Christian courtroom. His bond is no good. He must take the offer that Bassanio has made. So, A is the correct option, that his bond is good, but he must show mercy towards Antonio. When Shylock refers to Portia as Daniel, what is he referring to? The New Testament, the Old Testament, a Christian judge, his lost son. So he is referring to the Old Testament. What does Portia ask after the sentence was passed? That Shylock's bond gets torn up? Is there a scale to weigh the flesh that is cut off? That the court declares a mistrial? That the court reconsider? So, B. Is there a scale to weigh the flesh that is to cut? What does Antonio hold on to as he prepares his bosom for cutting? A Bible, Shylock's bond, Bassanio's hand, a crucifix. So, Antonio holds on to as he prepares his bosom for cutting. So he wants Bassanio's hand to be held. When Shylock is about to cut Antonio, what does Portia warn him about? He will be damned if he proceeds. He should make sure his knife is sharp. The bond doesn't allow to shed any blood. The Christians will surely get him back if he proceeds. So the bond doesn't allow you to shed any blood. If Shylock takes any flesh that is more or less than 1 pound, what will happen to him? Nothing. He dies and all belongings are to be confiscated by the state. Antonio will be allowed to cut a pound of flesh from Shylock. The bond will be torn up. So B, he dies and all his belongings are to be confiscated by the state. What is Shylock's response to this warning? He doesn't respond at all. He says, I'm concerned. Let me take my principal, that is 3,000 ducats, and go. I'll cut very carefully. So C is the correct answer. He asked for his principal. How does Portia respond to Shylock? Portia does not respond at all. Portia begs Shylock one more time. Very well, then proceed. The bond only calls for flesh. That is all that you are entitled to have. So she says, very well, then proceed. What is Portia's final surprise for Shylock? Portia tells Shylock that Jessica has married Lorenzo, that Antonio's ships have all come in, that Balthazar is Portia in disguise. He is under arrest for the attempted murder of a Christian. So the final surprise is D only, that he is under arrest for the attempted murder of a Christian. What is Duke's final decision? Antonio gets half of Shylock's possessions. Shylock is free to tear up the bond and leave. Both Shylock and Antonio will be put in jail together. Antonio and Shylock must not do business again. So, uh, A. Antonio gets half of Shylock's possessions. Once the trial is over, what does Bassanio offer Balthazar? The 3,000 ducats owed to Shylock, to take Balthazar to meet Portia, a ride back to Padua, to take Balthazar to dinner. So the 3,000 ducats owed to Shylock. What are the two things Portia asks of Antonio and Bassanio? A ring and a monkey, money and a letter of recommendation, a ring and a handshake, gloves and a ring. So D, gloves she asks from Antonio and a ring from Bassanio. Who tells Bassanio to give Balthazar what he asks for? Lorenzo, Gratiano, Antonio, the Duke. So Antonio asks Bassanio to give Balthazar what he asks for. Who enters the courtroom instead of Dr. Bellario? Bassanio, Nerissa, Portia, Duke. So that is Portia only. How does Nerissa react when Gratiano delivers her a ring, that is Bassanio's ring for Portia? She slaps him. She says that she will try to get Gratiano to give up his ring too. She says that Gratiano better not give away their monkey. None of the above. So B. B is the correct answer. Where does the scene take place? A street in Venice, masquerade, court in Belmont, court in Venice. So a street in Venice. Name two things that Portia asked Antonio and Bassanio for: gloves and a ring, ring and a letter, ring and ducats, gloves and a letter. So, gloves and a ring. At the end of Act 4, where does Portia send Nerissa? To find Antonio, to Bassanio, to Shylock's house, back to Belmont. So, she sends her to Shylock's house to get that deed signed. Who is dressed as the lawyer's clerk? Jessica, Nerissa, Portia, or Gratiano? Nerissa is dressed as the lawyer's clerk. Now, MCQs from Act 5. Act 5 opens with which two characters trading verbal barbs about their love? Jessica and Lorenzo, Antonio and Bassanio, Portia and Bassanio, Nerissa and Gratiano. So that is Jessica and Lorenzo. Who were the first people to return to Belmont? Nerissa and Gratiano, Portia and Nerissa, Jessica and Lorenzo, Antonio and Bassanio. The first, Portia and Nerissa, returned to Belmont. Where does Portia tell Lorenzo that she has been? Praying for her husband's welfare, tending to the work of a wife, visiting mine uncle in Padua, none of the above. So, A, praying for their husband's welfare. With whom does Gratiano argue when he enters the scene? Bassanio, Nerissa, Launcelot, himself. So, Gratiano argues with Nerissa when he enters the scene. In Act 5, how does Portia discover that Bassanio gave away his ring? She sees his empty ring finger. Bassanio confesses the truth immediately. Gratiano tells her, or Nerissa tells her. So that is Gratiano who tells her. What does Portia say she will never do until she sees the ring? She will never be his wife. Let Antonio stay in Belmont, sleep in peace, speak to Bassanio. So A, she will never be his wife. Who might have the ring according to Portia? Antonio, Gratiano, Shylock, another woman. So D, another woman. Who steps in and tries to explain to Portia that Bassanio's words are true? Antonio, Gratiano, Lorenzo, and Launcelot. So Antonio tries to explain. What does Portia give to Antonio? His own room at Belmont, the ring, his gloves, a kiss. Gives the ring to Antonio uh, to give it to Bassanio. What does Portia present as proof that she was the young lawyer in the courtroom? Gratiano's ring, Antonio's gloves, a letter from a monk at the monastery, a letter from Padua written by Dr. Bellario. So D, she shows the letter from Padua written by Dr. Bellario. What does Lorenzo think about people who do not like music? He has no opinion. They deserve cruelties. They are clever, they amuse him. So, B. They deserve cruelties. What makes Portia think the music she and Nerissa hear is more beautiful? The lonely setting, her victories, her intellect, the night. D. The night is the answer.